So I saw the film. It's amazing. It's a great exploration of identity and looking for who we are or where we come from. Can you comment on this aspect of the film? Rosen
Yeah,
playing Julie.
I think the theme of identity is always very interesting to us in our films, but also it's very interesting in other films that we like. So we're always drawn to characters who aren't sure about who they are or how identities might shift. And you know, off the top of your head, you could, you know, mention lots of films, but I'm just thinking of Vertigo, for example, Hitchcock's film, as being one example. But why we're interested in that, I guess it's partly to do with maybe a 20th, 21st century malaise, anxiety that we all have about how stable our mental health is. I think also the fact that we left Dublin to live in the UK back in the late 80s, a sort of a shift may have taken place within us that we probably realized other aspects to ourselves that may not have happened had we have stayed in Dublin. And sometimes I think travel can change you. And you become a slightly different person in the process of changing. And this idea of people being mutable, subject to change, we find compelling. And also I think within our families, there have been one or two unfortunate people that have endured mental health issues where they literally, their personalities have changed. And to watch that is quite a spectacle, frightening as well. But you begin to wonder, will they ever return back to the people that you remember, which they do after they've been in hospital and then get well again. So there's a number of different reasons as to why we're drawn to this overall theme. And then Rose Plays Julie, it finds a new way of expressing itself for us.
So how do you work together? Who does what? And do you get into arguments? Or how's the daily life working together?
We definitely get into arguments, but in a way, because they're work arguments, that's okay. And so we seem to work through a lot of our own issues through trying to work together on making work. But we've done this for so long, Guy. We've been together for a very long time, and we started working together back in the 80s. And we've worked together in different ways, in theatre and online and with community art projects, and now with film. And we've always written together, so that's a big part of trying to make a film. And we also edit. That's another really big extended part of the process. It's the bit in the middle, the directing, that's probably the trickiest, and it's of course the thing we do least of all, because you don't get to make that many films along the way. And so we've got to, and it's always really intense, you've got to work an awful lot out. And so for myself and Joe, you do kind of have to protect yourself, because you know there's two of us, and to make sure that, you know, we don't let ourselves down in front of the crew. And as much as possible use the time when we're not on set, or you know, just walk away from the set if we need to. If we need to work something out, just try to walk away, figure it out, and come back. It's a
great way of facing those potential problems. But listen, so because in a way we are a product of our past, or a percentage of who we are today was produced historically since we got here. So you think that Rose, well, in a way her past has been destroyed, or, I mean, I don't know how to put it. I don't think her past has been destroyed, but they cover part of it and created this new identity that is painful for her to know that her past is not her past. Or I don't.
It's not for anybody who's had the rug pulled from under their feet in that way, particularly around something so personal and intrinsic to who we are, our identity and how we see ourselves. I mean, I can barely think of anything as extreme And you know, within the whole world of adoption, people experience adoption in many different ways, and there's no one set way of thinking about it. But we wanted a character who wanted to know where she came from and who her parents were, and maybe she herself wanted to hang on to the idea that maybe I came from a good place. If I was loved, if I was wanted, but life got in the way, I'm happy with that, but I'd like to have a relationship with at least my birth mother. And to go through that process and to discover that you were conceived in this, through this violent act, I can only imagine that in real life that would be very traumatic. So it's like the trauma of the original rape is played out again in a different way on this new victim, because she becomes a victim the moment she discovers how she was actually conceived.
Also, Peter is like, I don't know, how would you describe the character of Peter? It's, I mean,
yeah, there's a big discussion in the country at the moment because of this terrible incident that happened a couple of weeks ago with Sarah Everard. And it's led to a lot of, you know, radio discussions and TV discussions about.
And demonstrations all over, no? I saw it on BBC.
Demonstrations. Yeah, police.
Vigils, we've had a
vigil in our local park outside here. And it's led to a lot of conversations about men and boys and masculinity and how men view women and their relationship to women. And so there's a lot of, with Peter, he's sort of managed this act of living these lies, that he can perform this very approachable, amicable man, but he's skillful at lying and is adept at that. And maybe that's a skill that some men learn. And so it's an interesting time. I mean, when we started writing this, it was back in 2014 and 15. And of course, this is before Me Too. And now this new incident, which is happening, there will be, sadly, always new incidences or new events. But the issue, this tension between men and women, in a way, it's more like the stuff when we were writing of a Greek tragedy or a Greek drama. I mean, actually, we see it as a love story between a mother and a daughter, but this particular aspect of it with the father, there's something of a Greek drama about it. And it's perennial because those issues go on and on. I mean, our daughter's studying Othello at the moment. And, you know, here we see these egotistical, vain, possessive, jealous men and the violence that they enact. So it's very Shakespearean as well. So all of this is to say that it's tragic, but it's not, you know, it's not the end of it, but it's a continuing dialogue. So, and Peter, I guess in some ways represents this kind of man.
Would you say that the patriarchal society in which we live promotes a very dangerous idea of what being a man means?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really difficult and complicated question, and it's deeply problematic. It's just that we have a daughter, she's 18, and every day of the week, I find myself thinking, for God's sake, what's wrong with men? You know, what is wrong? And you have to check yourself because she's young and she's got a boyfriend and she's got a father and she's got lots of really good men in her life.
Yeah.
But there is a problem in society. We have a deep problem, but we also have a problem in terms of the machinery of justice and how it has thrown the towel in on certain crimes. It has absolutely thrown the towel in on rape. It's like it's nothing. You won't be charged and you won't be prosecuted, most likely. And prosecution rates in this country are completely down again. We are losing this battle, and I think one of the problems is we don't talk enough about the rapist, not the rapist as in the men who appear on our screens and in our movies time and time again, almost not romanticized, but given this kind of, you know, status. It's the boys and the men who make up our society, who we need to be open and honest, and we need to have conversations going all the time about, you know, this relationship between men and women and how it can go so very wrong. I mean, when Joe's answered the question earlier, it was really important for us that Peter, he's a monster, but he's not portrayed as a monster. He's had a charmed life and he's gotten away with this. And eventually he runs out of road, and rightly so. I mean, we have a solution, but I'm certainly not putting up as something that we should go forward with as a society. But it was the solution that we found in our film. And partly it was to say the justice system will not help Ellen and Rose solve this problem. It will let them down, and it will let them down badly, and it does it all the time.
Great. My last question is, do you think the pandemic, because I mean, we've seen throughout the year that Hollywood didn't launch those huge movies that take over a lot of our attention as consumers. Do you think that the pandemic has helped independent filmmakers to get a moment on the stage? And I mean, I've been watching independent movies all year, and you can see BAFTA or Oscar or the Caesar Awards. They're all recognizing independent films. So I would like to know, what do you think of the pandemic in terms of professionals, and if it affected you in a positive way, just of course on that aspect of filmmaking, of daily life as filmmakers?
I don't know is the truthful answer. I mean, if we are seeing nominations for big prestigious awards being more inclusive and more diverse, I hope that's more than just the pandemic, that it was to do with the sea change that was coming in the last number of years. I know there's been lots of criticisms about the lack of female representation at Cannes or at or diverse nominations at the Oscars and so forth. So it felt like that was in the air. I wonder whether we'll really know next year and the year after whether it was the pandemic. In terms of the great frustration for us, in one sense, is that, you know, our film didn't get the release it was meant to get last year, but we're hoping later on the autumn in the UK and obviously in America next week it gets its virtual release. We hope that that will be also theatres in the UK. Of course, once the theatres open in the UK, there may well be a big rush into the vacuum, and then we have to compete as usual with the bigger films. And so you don't really, it wasn't like the pandemic only hit the big films at theaters, and, you know, independent cinemas were, you know, COVID resistant, and they would never get the virus, and so they were allowed to play in cinemas. It was all or nothing. And so it would be nice to feel online people just made a little bit more space in their diet to consume other than the normal run of things. I hope that's the case.
I think the experience is different here in the UK and Ireland, which we know very well also, because we don't really have the virtual screening rooms, the virtual cinema, because all of the independent cinemas were closed and staff were furloughed. So there was nobody to rush in and try and set up a new model. So I think it's very different in America, which I think you probably have really benefited from. And it is the smaller films that are getting more space around them. And, you know, audiences in America can still support their local cinema and buy a ticket from their local cinema. And it's relatively easy, I think. Here in the UK, it's very, very limited. And it's been slow to respond with something new and different. So we're still all waiting for the cinema doors to open. In terms of America, we're really glad we're getting a release, and we're really glad that those systems are in place so the film movement can, you know, find a way to put our film out there.